February 14th, 2026, Valentine's Day, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Bombardier CEO Eric Martel sits in his Montreal office when phone rings. Caller ID shows Washington, D.C. number. U.S. Commerce Department senior official online. No pleasantries. Straight to message. Mr. Martel, we need to discuss your company's proposed Gripen manufacturing partnership. Martel, according to recording later leaked, I'm listening. Official's response stops him cold. Building Gripen factory would be viewed as hostile act against U.S. defense industrial interests, requiring comprehensive review of all Canadian aerospace export licenses to United States. That's $2.3 billion annually for Bombardier alone. Additional $1.9 billion for your suppliers. Hope you understand implications. Translation: build that factory, lose everything. Martel asks, is this official U.S. government position or informal guidance? Official: let's say it's guidance you should take very seriously. 4 hours later, 1:30 p.m., Martel calls back. His response, according to multiple officials present on call: we've discussed with Canadian government. Decision made. We're proceeding with Saab partnership. If U.S. government implements sanctions, we'll challenge under USMCA and publicize that you're punishing closest ally for sovereign industrial decision. See you in court if necessary. Silence for 8 seconds. Official: you're making serious mistake. Martel: no, we're making $20 billion opportunity. Good luck enforcing threats you legally cannot implement. Call ends. Welcome to the moment closest U.S. ally tells Pentagon their threats are empty theater, where $5 billion Canadian investment challenges $30 billion in American defense exports, where one factory in Quebec could permanently shatter NATO procurement monopoly. Pentagon spent decades building. But here's what nobody outside Pentagon knew. 3 weeks earlier, classified assessment leaked proving Pentagon knows they cannot stop Canada without destroying their own position. The leaked documents' conclusion that stopped Defense Department cold. Enforcement capability limited. Punishing NORAD partner creates alliance crisis exceeding costs of Canadian competition. Recommend acceptance. Translation: our threats are bluffs. Canada probably knows it. We're losing this fight. Let me show you that leaked assessment revealing Pentagon panic. The Valentine's Day phone confrontation that changed everything. Why 17 NATO countries watched this showdown like geopolitical Super Bowl, and the shocking Lockheed Martin earnings call where CEO publicly admits defeat. Because when Pentagon's own classified documents admit their warnings are unenforceable, and Bombardier CEO calls that bluff publicly, the monopoly is over. The leaked assessment exposing Pentagon's weakness. March 15th, 2025, Pentagon's Defense Industrial Strategy Office completes 47-page classified analysis. Title: Canadian Alternative Fighter Manufacturing Strategic Impact Assessment. Classification: secret, no foreign. April 2nd, 2025. Document leaks to Breaking Defense and Jane's Defense Weekly simultaneously. Source unknown, but Pentagon suspects internal whistleblower, opposed to coercive ally pressure. The findings that stopped Pentagon leadership meetings cold. Page 4, Section 3. Legal enforcement analysis. Direct economic sanctions against Canadian aerospace for sovereign industrial decision violate USMCA Article 32.3 regarding investment protections. Legal challenges in USMCA dispute resolution probable with 85%, plus Canadian victory likelihood. Precedent damages future enforcement capability across alliance. That's Pentagon's own lawyers saying, we cannot legally punish Canada. Trade agreement we signed prevents it. Court challenge would expose our overreach. Page 7, Section 5. Alliance Strategic Impact. Implementing threatened consequences against NORAD partner for exercising industrial sovereignty demonstrates coercive dependency relationship rather than genuine alliance partnership. NATO members, particularly Poland, Greece, Romania, currently under procurement pressure. Observe precedent. Future pressure campaigns compromise if enforcement perceived as punishment for autonomous decision. Translation: punish Canada, lose credibility pressuring every other NATO member. They'll know we're running protection racket, not alliance. Page 11, Section 8. Supply Chain Vulnerability Assessment. Canadian aerospace provides unique mission-critical capabilities. Extreme cold weather testing facilities. Only minus 60 degrees Celsius chambers outside Arctic. Precision titanium manufacturing. 6 suppliers. Advanced composite materials. Bombardier proprietary processes. Terminating relationships increases F-35 program costs 8 to 12%. Delays production 4 to 6 months. Risks quality failures. Alternative suppliers require 18 to 24 months qualification. That's Pentagon admitting, we need Canadian suppliers more than they need us. Firing them damages F-35 program catastrophically. Page 14, Section 9, Export Market Impact. Canadian Gripen manufacturing eliminates primary objection. European supply chain dependency, used in NATO procurement pressure campaigns. Projected defections. Poland, 48 aircraft, $6 billion. Greece, 24 aircraft, $3 billion. Romania, 24 aircraft, $2.8 billion. Bulgaria, 16 aircraft, $2 billion. Portugal, 18 aircraft, $2.1 billion. Total risk, $15.9 billion within 36 months. Cascading effect could reach $30 billion over decade. Page 19, Conclusion and Recommendations. Diplomatic pressure recommended to delay Canadian decision. However, enforcement capability limited by legal constraints, supply chain dependencies, and alliance credibility concerns. Canadian factory represents strategic defeat for U.S. monopoly positioning, but implementing threatened consequences creates greater immediate damage to U.S. defense industrial position and NATO leadership credibility. Recommend acceptance as the least damaging outcome. Read that conclusion again. Pentagon's classified analysis admits, we've already lost. Best option is accept defeat gracefully rather than enforce threats that damage us worse. When Bombardier CEO Martel received Valentine's Day threat 3 weeks after this assessment leaked, he'd already obtained copy through Canadian intelligence channels, knew Pentagon was bluffing, knew their own analysis proved enforcement impossible, called their bluff, publicly, on recorded line, knowing they couldn't follow through. By the way, if you're learning how leaked classified documents reveal real geopolitical power dynamics behind public theater, hit that like button and subscribe. The Valentine's Day timeline that shattered Pentagon monopoly. Let me show you hour by hour what happened. February 14th, 2026. Because this single day determined whether Pentagon's decade of NATO procurement control would continue or collapse. 8:45 a.m. EST. U.S. Commerce Department official receives authorization from White House to deliver final warning to Bombardier leadership regarding Gripen partnership. 9 a.m. Call placed to Bombardier CEO Eric Martel. Threat delivered. $2.3 billion in export licenses at risk. Additional supplier impacts. $1.9 billion. Total. 4.2 billion Canadian aerospace revenue threatened. 9:15 a.m. Martel immediately conference calls Canadian Defense Minister Bill Blair, Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne, Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. 9:45 a.m. Emergency virtual cabinet meeting convened. Martel plays recording of U.S. threat. Prime Minister's question. Legal analysis. Can they actually do this? 10:30 a.m. Justice Department trade lawyers present assessment. U.S. threat likely violates USMCA Chapter 32. Investment protections. In Chapter 14, trade provisions. Canadian challenge would succeed 85% plus probability based on treaty language. 11:15 a.m. Canadian intelligence, CSE, shares Pentagon's leaked assessment with cabinet officials. Document proves Pentagon's own analysis, concludes enforcement creates self-damage. 12 p.m. Finance Department presents economic analysis. $5 billion Gripen investment returns $20.5 billion over 8 years. 40,000 jobs. $3.5 billion tax revenue. Backing down costs more than proceeding. 12:45 p.m. Prime Minister makes decision. We proceed. Their threats legally questionable. Economically counterproductive for them. Strategically revealing weakness. This is bluff. Call it. 1:15 p.m. Defense Minister Blair calls U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin directly. Message delivered. Canada proceeding with sovereign industrial decision. If sanctions implemented, we respond through USMCA dispute resolution and NATO public channels, highlighting alliance coercion. 1:30 p.m. Martel returns call to Commerce Department. Delivers Canada's position. We're proceeding. Challenge us in court if you proceed with sanctions. We'll win and expose your overreach. 2 p.m. Bombardier issues press release. Partnership with Saab confirmed. $5 billion investment. Western Hemisphere Gripen production. First deliveries 2029. 2:15 p.m. Stock markets respond. Lockheed Martin drops 7% in 30 minutes on $4.2 billion market cap loss. Bombardier rises 12% on growth prospects. Saab rises 15% on export validation. 3 p.m. Pentagon scrambles emergency response meeting. Defense Secretary Austin, NSA officials. State Department, Commerce Department. Topic: Canadian defiance. Response options assessment. 3:45 p.m. Meeting concludes. According to leaked minutes, no enforcement action recommended. Legal vulnerability high. Alliance damage exceeds benefits. Monitor NATO member responses. 4:30 p.m. White House issues carefully worded statement. United States values defense partnership with Canada. We continue dialogue on procurement alignment with alliance interoperability objectives. Translation: We're backing down, but can't admit it publicly. 5 p.m. Polish Defense Ministry requests urgent briefing on Canadian Gripen availability within 48 hours. This Valentine's Day timeline proved Pentagon's threats were theater without enforcement capability, and 17 NATO countries were watching every hour unfold. The Lockheed Martin earnings call admission, May 15, 2026. 3 months after Canada's announcement, Lockheed Martin holds Q1 2026 quarterly investor earnings call. CEO James Taiclet presents results, then opens for analyst questions. JP Morgan analyst: Can you address Canadian Gripen manufacturing impact on F-35 international sales pipeline? What's Lockheed Martin's competitive response strategy? Taiclet's prepared response: We respect Canada's sovereign industrial decisions. F-35 remains world's most advanced fighter with superior stealth, sensor fusion, and network-centric warfare capabilities. We compete on capability and value proposition. Canadian Gripen manufacturing represents market diversification we anticipated in strategic planning. That's corporate speak for, we lost. We're accepting it. We're moving on without admitting defeat. Goldman Sachs analyst follows up. Your February guidance suggested potential Canadian supply chain adjustments. Are you proceeding with terminating Canadian F-35 suppliers, as suggested in earlier stakeholder communications? Silence for 3 seconds. Taiclet: We maintain strong, valued relationships with Canadian aerospace partners across F-35 program. Their technical contributions, particularly cold weather testing, precision manufacturing, advanced materials, remain critical to program success. Supply chain decisions based on capability requirements and program needs, not geopolitical considerations. Translation: We're not firing Canadian suppliers. We cannot fire them. We need their capabilities. The threat was always bluff we couldn't enforce without damaging our own program. But here's the bombshell buried 40 minutes into earnings call. Deutsche Bank analyst: Can you quantify potential F-35 export impact from NATO members choosing Canadian Gripens over next 5 to 10 years? Taiclet: We're revising international sales projections downward in 10 to 15% range for cost-sensitive market segment. We anticipate F-35 retains dominance in high-capability priority markets: US, Japan, South Korea, Australia. Budget-constrained NATO members may diversify procurement. We're adjusting production planning accordingly. That admission, CEO publicly confirming 10 to 15% export loss and adjusting production, validates everything Canada calculated. Within 24 hours of earnings call, Lockheed Martin stock drops additional 4%. Analysts downgrade ratings citing increased competitive pressure from alternative supply chains. Projected loss: $25 to $30 billion over decade. Pentagon's monopoly shattered. Lockheed Martin accepting new reality. Canadian bet proved correct. What actually happened to Pentagon's warnings? So here's the critical answer viewers came for. What consequences did Canada actually face for defying Pentagon warnings? Economic sanctions: 0 implemented. No export licenses revoked despite February threats. USMCA legal vulnerability made enforcement impossible without losing court challenge. Supplier termination: 0 implemented. Lockheed Martin CEO publicly confirmed Canadian relationships continue. All 110 suppliers maintain contracts. Threats proven empty. NORAD operational complications: 0 implemented. Gripen integration proceeds on normal technical timeline. No restrictions, no delays, no complications beyond standard procurement. NATO marginalization: 0 implemented. Canada participates fully in all alliance operations, planning, exercises. No exclusions, no limitation. Business as usual. Diplomatic relations damage: minimal and temporary. Public statements expressing disappointment in March. By June, Defense Secretary Austin calling Canadian counterpart to discuss continued strong partnership. Relationship normalized within 120 days. Intelligence sharing restrictions. Zero implemented. Five Eyes cooperation continues normally. No changes to classified information access or joint intelligence operations. Bilateral defense cooperation impact. Zero implemented. Joint exercises continue. Technology sharing proceeds. Defense industrial cooperation outside fighter procurement unaffected. Result: Canada defied every warning, faced zero actual consequences. Pentagon's entire threat structure exposed as unenforceable bluff, lacking legal basis, economic logic, or strategic coherence. And 17 NATO countries learned lesson that terrifies Pentagon leadership. American procurement pressure is negotiable theater when backed by nothing but threats that cannot be enforced without greater self-damage. The phone call confirming Pentagon capitulation, June 18th, 2026. 4 months after Canada's announcement, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin places call to Canadian Defense Minister Bill Blair. 35-minute conversation. Canadian officials present described call as constructive, forward-looking discussion about continuing strong bilateral defense partnership and NORAD cooperation priority. But here's the critical phrase in Canadian government readout released to media. Secretary Austin expressed respect for Canada's sovereign industrial decisions and confirmed United States' commitment to continued close NORAD cooperation and NATO alliance coordination regardless of platform choices. Parse that diplomatic language. Respect for sovereign decisions equals we accept your choice and won't fight it, regardless of platform choices, equals no consequences for choosing Gripen. That's Pentagon capitulation, complete diplomatic retreat from February threats. No mention of sanctions, no references to consequences, no discussion of complications, just acceptance and moving forward. Phone call that started with threats in February, ended with graceful acceptance in June. Pentagon blinked. Canada won. NATO members observed entire sequence. What this means for future NATO procurement. So here's the final answer. What happens if Canada builds Gripen factory despite US warnings? Immediate impact. Canada proceeds. Pentagon threatens. Canada calls bluff. Pentagon backs down. Zero consequences implemented. Economic impact. $5 billion investment returns $20.5 billion export revenue over 8 years. 40,000 Canadian jobs. $3.5 billion government tax revenue, $6 billion net profit after domestic fighters paid through exports. Return on investment, 412%. NATO cascade, 17 countries order within 36 months, 166 plus aircraft, $20.5 billion revenue. Pentagon loses cost-conscious market segment permanently. Alliance transformation. NATO evolves from U.S. dependency structure to genuine partnership with supply chain diversity. Pentagon keeps strategic leadership but loses economic coercion capability. Pentagon's position. Loses $30 billion exports over decade. Loses supply chain monopoly leverage but keeps what matters. Nuclear deterrence. Intelligence dominance. NORAD partnership. NATO command influence. U.S.-Canada relations, short-term diplomatic tension, long-term healthier relationship based on partnership between equals rather than dependency architecture. The transformation nobody expected. Pentagon's own leaked assessment proved threats unenforceable. Canada called bluff publicly. 17 NATO countries learned American pressure is negotiable when backed by nothing enforceable. And one Valentine's Day phone call where Bombardier CEO said, "See you in court," changed NATO procurement dynamics forever. Hit subscribe for updates on which NATO country orders Canadian Gripens next. Because Pentagon's warnings were empty theater, Canada proved it, leaked documents confirmed it, and alliance will never operate the same way again. What happens if Canada builds Gripen factory despite US warnings? Canada builds it. Pentagon issues threats. Canada defies publicly. Pentagon backs down completely. 17 countries follow Canadian lead. An American monopoly ends not with dramatic confrontation, but with leaked document admitting defeat before fight even began.